Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Heretic Hammer Podcast. I'm your host, Marshall, and this is my co-host, Dylan.
Hello, hello.
And today, we're back in the reins. We're ready to face the Quuuuuux.
We're going head first into the Zeknova, as it were.
As what time is it, Dylan?
I believe it's time for yet another episode of Mobile Suit Gundam, Dylan's Counterattack.
Every episode.
They're always a counterattack. That's my secret.
That's my secret, Cap.
A counterattack to what? I don't know. But they're always a counterattack. And yes, as Marshall mentioned, today we're going to be talking about the newly released and also newly finished latest entry in the Mobile Suit Gundam anime universe, I guess would be appropriate to say. We'll be talking about...
multiverse, I guess, technically, actually, because they have multiple timelines and universes.
The wild and wacky world of Mobile Suit Gundam Gquuuuux.
Yes. When we finally, got to learn the name, because when this was announced, man, was this a question?
So first thing we need to address, Gquuuuux has 6 U's. Is this too many U's or too few? Discuss.
I mean, when you look at the logo, it's 3, and then 2 half U's, and then 1 third U.
Yeah.
So that's 4 1/3 U's. Not really. If you really want to really dive into the nitty gritty of it.
Yeah. It feels like it wants to be 3 U's really, really bad, and then put a little extra ketchup and mustard on top. And it's like,
this
there's
is
already
very much,
chili on this hot dog. You didn't have to put ketchup and mustard on it too. You're kind of
they
they
decided. Yeah, they were like, we're gonna name it Gquuuuux, which when you see it on model kits, or as in text, a listing, the name of the anime, everything is spelled Gquuuuux, so just the 3. But then it's clear when they designed the logo, some intern came in and was like, what if I added 2 half and 1/3 U's? Just really settle it in, show that I've got some mocks. They're like, well, we don't have time. You fucked up the logo and saved over our original one, so we don't have time to make it over again, so I guess we're going with it. You're fired, by the way.
Well, all you need to know, regardless of the number of views, is that today we are talking Mobile Suit Gundam Gquuuuux, which was originally released in January as a sort of a combined film that took elements from the first 3 episodes and half of the 8th episode.
Really?
We watched it. Yes, actually.
No.
You and I believe, both watched it as the actual anime series, which aired from April to June of this year. And as of this recording, has just finished a few days ago. So we figured it was the perfect time to hop in and talk about it and give kind of our thoughts and review of it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be partly interested, I guess, on which part of episode 8 was. I mean, I guess if I had to guess, probably the historical part, because it's kind of what the movies were meant to be.
Yes, correct.
Okay. Yeah, but otherwise, I'd say we'll give our review, kind of instead of this being the previous, the 0079 ones. Where we kind of gave more of a recap and opinions along the way. We're just gonna kind of go over relative plot points, and just kind of as forming of opinions, right?
Just a more casual review of its characters, its pacing, its themes, how it executes on it, and whether it was, whether we enjoyed it.
Yes, which I mean, we'll kind of dive into in a minute, but I mean, it was also, I think, the thing about it especially was that the anime kind of as a whole almost had it like went into like a kind of, I don't want to say maybe unusual, but like it went into a semi kind of new style, both kind of thematically as well as artistically. You know, a lot of people, the Gquuuuux design, especially at first, was real polar, like
real polarizing.
Yeah, polarizing. That was the word I was looking for.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it has a very very modern, lot more curves than the angles that we're familiar with, throwing away the hip to be square aesthetic of like the classic RG78 or RX78 rather. I will say, just as a brief preamble, this series, releasing this year, in a lot of ways feels like more so a celebration of Gundam than it does something that is really trying to do its own thing. And a big part of that, I feel, is the main writers behind it. This series is a collaboration between Sunrise and Studio Khara. Studio Khara has worked on Gundam series in the past. They basically did like ancillary like support work on Mobile Suit Gundam Unicorn. But other people might know Studio Khara as the studio founded by one Hideaki Anno, who also co-wrote this series. And if you know Hideaki Anno, you know that he is most known as the creator of the series Neon Genesis Evangelion, as well as the director of works such as Gunbuster, Nadia, The Secret of Blue Water, which is going to come up later, and also has done various live-action reboots of really popular Japanese properties, with films like Shin Godzilla, Shin Ultraman, Shin Kamen Rider, which similarly were these sort of re-envisionings and celebrations of these really well-known, infamous Japanese stories from throughout time. He co-wrote this with Yoji Enokido, and the thing to understand about Yoji Enokido, who was responsible for a lot of the more I'll say modern, but we'll get more into what I mean by that later, but it's a lot of the story that involved our actual protagonists as opposed to the like influences of 0079 and like the callbacks to that. Yoji Enokido is known for also writing on Neon Genesis Evangelion, but he is also the creator of FLCL. He worked on Sailor Moon, or High School Host Club, Captain Earth, Bungo Stray Dogs. And you really feel both of these artists' influence throughout this show. They are credited again as co-writers, and this show, for me especially, feels like this giant 12-episode blender of nearly everything that these two artists have created. And I was curious, Marshall, for you, if you were familiar with these two being involved beforehand, and if you also felt a lot of that influence.
I mean, I knew of the like Evangelion, like kind of the the creator and like that aspect. But yeah, I did not really entirely know about the, I guess like the other, I guess former, you look at it as like other former Gainax influence.
Definitely, yes.
But did I feel it? Yes. I mean, like the reality of the like, yeah, like the definite kind of showing of like the fact of it being there and like where their influences come in versus especially maybe like kind of the idea of how especially older Gundam series went from like a story and kind of meeting perspective. It's definitely apparent because like there's the type of story that each creator likes to go for, and the type of story that they like, that these creators specifically like to go for, is definitely apparent.
Yes.
But I wouldn't say it was like, it's not obviously so in line with all of that where it's like, oh, it's just Eva Cooley Part 2, like.
Mm-hmm. Did you find that
visible?
Did you find that those elements like conflicted with each other at all, or did you think that was it more of a blend? Do you think, or did they sort of match?
I think
together?
It was more of a blend. I think I'll definitely get partly into that as we kind of especially talk about the character development of both Machu and Jan.
Certainly.
I think it's also inherently something, though, that unfortunately I think I had felt about some of the older Gundam series' usage of the young female characters.
Mm-hmm.
Because inherently my frame of reference for Gundam female characters is obviously the OG series, that includes up to Char's Counterattack, and then parts of Gundam Wing.
Mm-hmm.
Because I have not truly watched Seed yet, and then I've not watched any of the recent series, especially like Witch of Mercury, which obviously has a female lead role, so I can't speak to that one. But
all right, so let's actually.
But some of the things that are semi-reminiscent of my opinions on some of the characters of old.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good spring point for us. Let's get into our actual review of Mobile Suit Gundam. Wait a minute.
No.
What's this doing here? Let me just move this out of the way. There we go.
That hits. That hits so hard, actually.
I knew that would connect.
Oh, that hits. That art hits so hard.
Is
this official, or who made this?
I genuinely can't remember, because I pulled this up like a while ago and just like stored. I was like, I'm gonna put this aside for later.
All right, we need to find the source of this.
Yes, we'll need to get the source so that we can.
So
you
guys
put it
see,
in the video.
Yeah, you guys see it. I just don't.
Yeah,
at the moment.
This is.
I'm not pulling a West Hammer here.
This
Topical.
is
anyway.
This is the second Gundam series in a row to have a female as the lead protagonist.
Yeah, I would say that is in a row. That is right.
We just had Witch from Mercury prior to this, and now we have Gquuuuux. So yeah, I think that's definitely something that's kind of on everyone's mind as far as Machu as a protagonist. When you're comparing to to the kind of the long line of series before that have had male protagonists, usually on the younger side.
Yeah.
With that in mind, what do you think of one Amate Yuzuriha, aka Machu?
Yeah. I mean, like, obviously I was gonna say the joke, the woke joke aside, this has been, I mean, inherently Gundam as a whole is such a like male dominant coded series,
Absolutely.
Because you think about obviously the history right around it, where this is just you. This is kind of like that realm of like unga bunga robots fight each other, like there is that realm, and like the obviously primary audience for Gundam has always been a male centric, right? Like it's you look at our own analytics, they're very heavily male centric. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean that there isn't room and that there isn't growth to be had, because the way that you foster that wider audience, and especially speaking as a strong as someone who lives in a very strong capitalist nation, the reality is the way you get the widest audience is by representing the widest audience, and mm-hmm. This is such a and this is good then for that two levels, right? You now have representation, so anybody can watch this who who can identify with Machu, and feel represented, which is a plus. That also then gets more people into the show, which is a plus, which then potentially gets more people into the hobby, which is a plus. Because regardless of the capitalistic undertones underneath it, having more people in your camp is always a better thing. Because it strengthens the resolve of a community around it, right? Mm-hmm. Which is why we've had long discussions in the past about this concept, even in Warhammer. So Machu being, I think, a character, I think it was really key to me for her to not be like, all borderline kind of like, not to like, I didn't want her to be specifically like hyper strong headed, like, I'm watching through parts of Wing right now, and it's like Hero, where he starts off very confident, knowing everything, what he's doing, like knowing how to do so many of the things, because inherently he was trained. He starts the series trained to be what he's at. I didn't necessarily want it to that level, but I wanted a character that could gain confidence, that could kind of essentially honestly just be like Amuro. That was what I was hoping for her character. Mm-hmm. Not from the genius point, but from just the like struggling but learning to deal with it, right? So she really ended up being honestly the character I wanted her to be. Despite some of the criticisms I will lodge towards her character concept, but she was the character I was hoping she would be, right? She kind of fit almost right in that line where I felt like she could really be a good, teenage girl character without falling into only being defined as being a teenage girl. She was the pilot of the Gquuuuux, right? She even has kind of like an Amuro moment, which we'll talk about in a minute, but like
she has
with the Gquuuuux, with the Gquuuuux specifically.
She has an Amuro moment, yes. But what I like about Machu, and it was like apparent from episode 1, is that she's really not like Amuro. Like,
no,
she's set up in such a way, and like the events are playing out, especially at the beginning, to be like, oh, it's meant to mirror, Amuro's first interaction with the Gundam as well. But everything about how she feels about getting in the Gundam, why she's doing it in the first place, and what she decides to do after is so different from Amuro. It just immediately sets her apart as like, no, she has totally different ideas about like, this is what I should do, and this is what I want to do, and what I'm hoping to achieve. Right. Yeah, so, Amuro never was like, I'm going to get into an underground fighting ring now that I have possession of this Gundam.
Right. Well, the underground fighting ring didn't exist, so
we don't know. Hey man.
Well,
we don't
it didn't exist for him. He got locked immediately into that white base.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the thing, right? Because who's to say that if they didn't immediately recover the Gquuuuux, that she wouldn't have essentially have run into a similar scenario that Amuro did, and she's now in their, not white base, the Sodan.
Yes,
I think is what it became.
Yes, because it is not the white base owned by the Federation anymore in this but
it was first called Pegasus when it was still white in the before time.
Mm-hmm. And they also refer to it as the Rocking Horse.
Yeah. I do want to that is where maybe I want to start kind of as an overall look at the show. Is
absolutely.
The first thing I do like, but I also felt like ended up taking too many points in some degree, was the kind of flipping back and forth between kind of going through 0079 timeline stuff, obviously in this new version of it, and where they actually were now, right? Like getting to now.
Right. The huge, the sort of main set piece of this being, what if Char had gotten hold of the Gundam instead of Amuro, and completely changes the course of history, and Zeon succeeds over the Federation instead.
Yeah, and I mean, I think a bit of that between episode 1 through 3 probably could have honestly gotten a bit of addenduming and then allowed for more time to... I think so. From the first 3. Because the thing that happens later is that I think is way more important flashback-wise is why is Shalia Bull so invested in his spot and defining his motive. Those ones, like those flashbacks, and then the flashbacks obviously more into Lala and them trying to figure out the Rose of Sharon, and then obviously the first Zegnova, those are the most important.
Yes.
Because there's a lot of point where honestly we kind of can, knowing everything we know about 0079, because and obviously you're not meant to, maybe obviously I get that, like there should not be this expectation that you've watched 0079 in order to watch this show, right? But at the same time, by setting it up as an alternative universe to it, there is kind of the expectation that you know something about the original version. Especially with the way that plays out.
I would say, as part of my personal review of this series, that it really, really struggles to function as a show if you have not seen anything with 0079. I think it relies very heavily on being kind of a celebration of that original series, and Akito and Anno's love for it. Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
You mentioned one Shalia Bull, who is a major character in this series.
Correct.
Very important.
Yes.
Do you remember when we talked about him when discussing 0079?
We didn't really.
That is correct. We did not at all. Do you know why that is?
Because he doesn't really show up in the movies.
He does not show up in the movies. In fact, he was only in a single episode of the original anime show.
I didn't even know it was that small.
The amazing thing about Shalia Bull, and the thing that made me just like pop off from episode 1, because I was obviously the target audience of like point at the screen. Yeah. I can't believe it's that guy. As far back as when... I believe it was when Enokito was working on Fooly Cooly. I believe he and Anno had both expressed that if they had the opportunity to do a Gundam show, that they would want to bring back Shalia Bull because he was a much more important character in the original novels that Tomino was writing. And his position as like an ally of Char, as well as one of the first confirmed new types, actually had like a lot more play. Like it was a lot more of an important thing. And then in the anime series, he shows up for an episode, and then dies by the end of the episode. So for this, that was definitely a big motivation for them. Was like, we want to take Shalia Bull and like really stretch this dude out and like make him into a much bigger character.
Which is obviously way easier to do when you're having Zeon win the war, right?
Exactly.
When you're completely rewriting the history. Now that's so easy to do. And I agree 100%. Like this show really struggles to live without it, and which is why then like that's the thing, right? To me, then we all then know, right? For if anybody who has seen or knows of the plot line to 0079, we all know that the Gundam almost is single-handedly the reason that the Federation wins the war. And if you literally could just say those words, and we would get that, especially because of the way that it was presented, wherein like the whole Char disappearance thing is a mystery until later with the Zegnova, that we have to sit there and wonder, you know, where or what, you know, like we all know that if Char has in the Gundam, that essentially Zeon is just going to be winning this war. they're just gonna get to it. And knowing that, getting all of, essentially spending almost half of episodes through episode like 3 and 4, I think, just like spending all that time in these episodes, just like it more was that realm where, like, if this is only getting the 12 episodes in total, and this isn't just like a season 1, then that was time that could have been used to bring more into the relationship with, maybe like Machu and, the clan battle team, like giving them more character, so that like when all of a sudden, especially like with Anki, right? Like when essentially she's ready to kind of sell out the Gquuuuux, it's like, well, I guess, because I never, I guess, had a reason to trust you in the first place. So, I mean, I guess I could see her doing this, but they frame that whole thing in this sense of like, as if she has worked with Zeon before multiple times potentially. And if that's the case, there was nothing previously to indicate that I should expect that.
Yeah.
And that could have been a really interesting thing if there wasn't an extra episode entirely dedicated to 0079. When I watched that, I thought about that one time where you tell me your friend, the main thing they were disappointed about Gquuuuux is they're kind of sick of the 0079 timeline. And I'm like, well, it's fine if it's all now in the new timeline, but then you start the series and so much is spent on 0079.
Well, it's interesting because even the 0079 stuff, a lot of it that were being shown here, even that isn't the original 0079. Like, that is a lot of that, like particularly like the Char that we're focusing on is a different timeline, with a different Char, a different Amuro, a different Lala. I truly enjoyed watching this series. I feel like it's important to say this at some point, that I did enjoy. This was a really fun series to watch. But I believe, and this is why I asked you before about like the co-creators, whether or not their influences flowed together, whether they meshed or whether they clashed. This series suffers so much from its runtime, being the shortest Gundam series in history. At only 12 episodes, it feels like it is trying to pack so much into this short runtime of 6 hours, and it constantly suffers for it. Everything it tries to execute on feels only like mostly satisfying. There is a constant sense of like, we're introducing new concepts, new things to you, tons of questions, reasoning that doesn't make sense, characters that don't actually get to be fleshed out properly. And you have these two competing, equally interesting storylines, which is the alternate what if of 0079 where Zeon wins, and the story of Machu becoming involved in these underground fight rings, in the clan battles. And it feels like two different anime concepts that have been smashed together, and the results are okay, but like really confusing and overall super bothersome. Like, you spend the whole series going, this could have been so much better if they had either doubled the episode length, extend this out to a second season, or just make this two different series. Because in its current state, it feels like two projects mashed together that just leaves a whole lot of questions and a whole lot of unsatisfying moments. For me, at least.
Right. Well, and I agree with that 100%. This is why what I would say is I think like some of the best segments of this show is when you get through. So I guess I was kind of getting through part of the episodes wrong here, but it's as you get through episode 3 into 5. I think are when the show was like really in this great segment where it was really just about Yan, Machu, and Shuji essentially utilizing this like wonderfully adolescent plot line of let's do this clan bat so that we can go to Earth, we can make money and go to Earth, and we will go see the beaches.
I just want to know. I 100% agree with you. I really like this block. It's the block that feels the most like those 3, Machu, Suki, and Yan, get to be the main characters and truly get to like we're actually getting them at the forefront of the story. And I don't think it's a coincidence. I think it's very much directly related. These 3 episodes were also written by Enokito.
And because
a lot of the FLCL of it all, that this amazing series that is obviously renowned for its sort of like preteen teen characters, and they're struggling through like teenage romance and like the awkwardness of it all. Like this is where he's shining, and it's where it's at its most interesting. But it doesn't always get to be that way, as you were saying.
Yeah, because in that block you have the plot and battle like with Shiko Sugai.
Yes.
Right. The
witch.
Yes, but was it mother, or was it was she mother, or was she was with somebody, one of the people who died like in the war?
Yes.
Was it well, I don't think it was mother because she was in the war, so it had to be like lover. I'm trying to remember. Shoot, I forgot that whole. Let me see quick. Oh no,
it was her
right
Mav. It was her Mav that was
her Mav.
Killed.
Yeah,
killed by Char.
She has a son. She is a mother now.
Yeah, but she has a husband and a child
that she lost. Yeah, but it was a Mav that she lost in the war.
Yeah, she hasn't been able to fully get over the loss of her Mav, which is a really interesting thing that this series like focuses on, is the idea of Mavs in general. They really right from the get-go, they really sort of like hone in on this idea of like being a really good Gundam pilot isn't just about being a good pilot yourself. It's like having this Mav, this partner, somebody that you like attack and move in formation with, move in unison with. And it's really interesting how they kind of introduce this as this like insane, super brilliant tactical strategy that has been recently uncovered. And it's like, no, the idea of like working in pairs and working in units has always been a thing. That's absolutely existed, but this is the first series
I played
in
Army
Gundam.
of Two.
Yeah. But this is the first and it's been present in Gundam as well, but this is the first Gundam series to be like, no, it really is about like having a partner in battle is a big deal.
Right. And I mean I think that could make more, they have I think the justification to do that, because that wasn't really the case in the original series, because it was always Amuro. And then the only time that could have essentially came up was in Zeta, because that was really the only time that they had multiple Gundam in this timeline.
In the original series, they had you had the other members of the White Base that were helping them out, but at the end of the day, the expectations of everyone was like, well, Amuro's the one who's actually going to save the day. And even I was
gonna say, and even the gun cannon and gun tank are not the Gundam.
And when Sayla would join in, like Sayla would take over the Gundam also. Like they didn't have like a second identical Gundam for her to work
with. A second Gundam did not hit the Xeon.
No. As a matter of fact.
Not until later. But that's the thing. So like I think they were totally justified to be like, no, in this universe, in this timeline, this became more important because this was a Xeon like we're just saying we're going to essentially make it that Xeon and Char specifically really wanted to focus on this concept. And I think that justifies that idea. I think actually comes around as like a really good for the core identity when you realize essentially as the series goes on about the fact that like, well, if the whole universe essentially is meant to exist so long as Char is alive, then that would make sense then that this universe has such an importance on two-person combat to ensure that both pilots live.
The universe is born out of a connection between two people. A new type connection, but also a thematic and deeply personal connection. And the entirety of this series is like a constant string of these like two-person connections between varying people, just sort of being played out all throughout it.
Exactly. So like I think that's why like I definitely think it's totally justified to like, it makes total sense to me that like there was this bigger focus on the Mav concept. It's just then I think it could have been fine to get into the whole Cassilia thing. I think just what was tough I actually, and in some ways I actually think what maybe should have happened was the Cassilia Zegnova and separation of the three should have happened faster, which is going to sound crazy, but hear me out. The reason I say that is because if we just get through this separation, we don't kind of pussyfoot around Machu trying to steal the money, the whole supposed kind of negotiation between Anki and Shalia Bol. We kind of just, if we make it where instead it's like they use the attack from what would have been the Zeta Titan, I guess, terrorists in this case. If we use that as like, they essentially as a group kind of just all get caught off guard by this. And when effectively what was that fight happens, and then that leads to the separation between the three, and we have, then we end up having Jan get into moving over with Xavier to Cassilia's side. Shalia takes Machu. Shuji goes to the Zegnova. If that just like happens from just say like, all right, there was this attack happened, we're just moving in and getting the shit. And instead of kind of doing this like in between kind of playing around, like I think then we could have gotten to a point then where all the stuff that happens after it, which I think was great, or like could have been great, but obviously had the problem then of suddenly needing not only the extra context of going back in time again to learn about the first Zegnova, like and whatnot. We could have spent that time there, had more justification for going back and looking into that, learning why does Shalia care so much about Char, obviously then what happened with the first Zegnova, getting through all that, then having that more time to kind of for them to potentially either figure out essentially their new relationship as kind of being on two sides of a different war. But instead it just kind of ends up being, hey, we're here now. Oh shit, everything's happening.
There is a real jump, I feel like.
Yeah.
During the like episode 6 through 8 period, where I'm like, if this series had the like more traditional runtime that we're used to of like say like a 24 or 26 episode series,
Yeah, at least.
We would have gotten so much more time with the main three and what they were doing on side 6 before we ever touch any of the additional stuff with Char. And even that would have had a lot more time to breathe and explain it. Whereas in the point of like episode 7, Machu's Rebellion, where, you know, that's where Amate's trying to like steal the prize money. You have, you know, everything with Xavier and Cassilia, the assassination attempt, all that. Like, hitting this episode was such a like wall of just like, okay, we had maybe a few episodes to let you kind of get more familiar with these other characters. Now we're going to make the whole focus of the story shift, and we're going to make it about all this other stuff that's going on.
Yeah.
And it is so abrupt, and it just hits you out of nowhere, and it's like, okay, I could have used like a whole lot more time with what we had going on in the moment before we just go right into this like potential civil war plot with Zeon and everything happening with that. Because it is, man, it just shows up. And then once it's here, it's here.
Yeah. Which, again, I know I kind of pushed for that concept where to just almost even double down on the fast shift. But that's the thing. To me, it's like, if it's kind of two ways, right?
Yeah.
It's either you do it right away and you literally rip the Band-Aid and then now you're in this shift.
Mm-hmm.
Or you don't do the shift at all and you just focus in one plot line for this type of short series. Because this is obviously in the context, yes, of a 12 episode series.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. It's that shift, that whole thing. And I know we mentioned like that, like kind of happens in Machu's Rebellion and all that. But like all of that technically starts in the previous episode.
Yeah,
because that's when
you're right. The actual assassination was like one episode earlier, right?
They show up. Yeah, the previous episode was called "The Plot to Assassinate Cassilia."
That's right. Yes.
But like they show up, they start getting out there, they start moving around. Then all of a sudden you're just kind of like, well. And that's when that whole conversation happens, right? Between Shalia and Anki. It's just, and again, like, it's like, because it happens, the thing is, it happens fast, but it kind of happens between 2 episodes. And a lot of the things that happened in 6 really don't matter. Because the second you make this giant shift, it doesn't matter. Because the reality is the Pomeranians cease to exist in this show after episode 7.
Mm-hmm.
And like, if you're gonna do that, I get that. But if you're gonna do that, then don't make it seem like the Pomeranians are so important to that shift. Instead, just have them get fucked over by Zeon doing about having this fight, or by the Titans coming in and having this battle, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's where I'm like, have this kind of aspect of like, don't try to like tease us as if they're like knowingly involved, or that Anki and even Nabu like know anything, like actually either make them involved completely so that they existed later. They should they should have existed later, or don't involve them at all in and just suddenly make it that they're just as caught off guard by this as anything.
Mm-hmm.
And that when we see them later, when we see them at the end of the series, it's more like, oh hey, they made it. Honestly, like make that a scenario where like, instead of them being involved in it, make it seem like something happened to them. We're left on a cliffhanger, and then at the end we're like, all right, they made it. Look at them. Because, like, I kind of have this, like, weird feeling about Anki when I see her at the end now, where it's like, yeah, but, like, what are you? Are you good? Like, are you chill? Like, are you actually chill? Because, like, you kind of were selling her out for no reason. And, like, I know you let her go and all, but, like, I don't know how to feel about you.
There was never a point in this series for me where I, like, effectively cared about the Pomeranians in any way. And I never got the impression that they particularly cared about Machu at all.
Yeah. Well, that's a shame because Anki, I felt like they were beginning to form that, you know, after 3 and into 4, kind of getting into this was, you know, Machu's developing her feelings and she's genuinely kind of trying to guide her because, you know, obviously in this scenario, Machu can't really have this conversation with her mom.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, I'm really into this, like, this boy who pilots a red mech and
I met this homeless guy
all the time.
I met this homeless guy who smells people, like, on first introduction. Right. I kind of think he's, like, really cute, and I don't know what to do about that, so I'm just gonna pilot a death machine.
Right, yeah, like, she can't have that conversation. She just can't. And so
teenage girls will literally pilot the Gundam before going to therapy. We're finally reversing the role. Finally. Even if we just do it for this one. Even if we just do it for this one series. We're reversing the role.
Truly. Yeah, it's just like... And so that's the thing. It's like, I feel like if we, you know... If they spent less, then that's the thing, right? So that's why my whole point is that if they spent less time on the early flashbacks and spent more time with the Pomeranians, like with Machu and the Pomeranians, gave them some form of decorum and like relationship, and then if they just made everything, the whole switch over faster, or at least, if anything, made Anki, like, her semi-betrayal, like, a real betrayal, then I would have emotions about it.
Yeah.
Even if they didn't just, like, give them, like, a flash, like, we don't know what happened to them, you know, then at least it would feel more like a betrayal or something. But, like, it's just kind of like I guess.
You get the moment at the end of episode 5 where... they're congratulating Machu on winning against the former Black Tri-Stars. And even that is just like... more so just them being like, you did a good job at winning this for us, as opposed to like, we like you and we're proud of you. And it's also entirely undercut by the fact that it wasn't her doing it. It was Nyan who was actually piloting. Which, of course, it plays into sort of the jealousy and the relationship triangle that's happening there. But
and I think that part would have been valid.
It's good for her for that sort of love triangle situation that's going on, but it's bad for the relationship with the Pomeranians. Like, it doesn't do anything to, you know, convince you that she has an actual bond with these other people.
Exactly, and so like. Then, and I mean, like, because that's the thing is, I mean, we could get into, I think, the whole thing about, like, you know, should we, like we could talk about, like, was it worth having Dex, Gates, and Bask show up?
Yeah.
I think it's fine. Yeah, I think that was easily fine to have them come in, because it's just like, look, it works great as, here's these characters you know of, and specifically to them, but like, here's these characters you know of, you know, but then, and like, because it facilitated well, because it gave reason, right? Mm-hmm. It gave reason for the Zeon forces to become more involved inside 6, because that's the whole thing, is they're trying not to get too involved, and the reason they haven't like gone and forced their way into the Gquuuuux is because they don't want to break Side 6's rules and create a whole reason for war and shit.
We don't want to...
And them showing up is a great is a great reason for Zeon to get involved.
Yeah.
Right? You have a Psycho Gundam with this.
Yep. You have Psycho Gundams and
insane
Cyber
new
types.
type.
This is a problem.
You know, it's like, yeah, like, so that was great, and like that part was totally fine. That's why, like, I don't have a problem with them showing up at all. I think just then what ended up being the thing, though, is that, you know, now, okay, they're there, and they've had this impact. Can the impact actually do something?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
We should talk about, as we're talking about characters here, we should definitely touch on the other two main characters, Neon and Shuji Ito.
Yes. I think it's a really unfortunate because I think Shuji represents everything good and bad about the series.
Go on.
I think he is really good about showing the kind of interesting mystery. I think everything that he kind of does makes you question, right? Why is he talking to the Gundam? Why is he so obsessed
The
with
Gundam told me that.
Yeah.
So says the Gundam.
Yeah, I mean the little robot, and then obviously his real purpose, right? His almost kind of omnipotent connection to Lala and the universes. He's this like incredibly special new type. So, but then his existence, because of his importance and his existence, he effectively takes all importance and intrigue away from Yan as a character. She's just kind of there.
It makes me
Third
so
wheel.
angry because Neon as a character, I've seen people say that she does effectively nothing for the entire series. I don't agree with that, but it is astounding how often she is playing second fiddle to everyone else in the cast. And really she is given things to do. I guess that's the way to put it. She's given things to do, but what I'm looking for is for her doing things more proactively or because she wants to do them. Her primary motivation at some point just kind of becomes, I am obsessed with Shuji as well. And there's no real clear basis of like another goal that she has otherwise. And so a lot of times other characters are handing her things to do or to be a part of. And she just lacks agency in a way that's really frustrating to me.
And what needed to happen, because look, we're already locked in to this, and I'm going to talk about this in a second, but we're already locked in to this classic anime, this role I hate for a lot of women in anime of all of my motivation is surrounded by boy. What is that test called? The one where it's like if you can have two female characters in a scene, and Bechdel Test, yeah. Like,
how long can they go without referencing a man? Yeah, we're talking about a man.
Yeah, can you go a whole scene without referencing a man? And honestly, I should have. I didn't think about this until now, unfortunately. But like, I would really love someone in the comments, please tell me, at any point, do characters pass the Bechdel test in this show? Because it's obviously a problem in anime in general. But then what ends up being my whole thing is like, okay, if you're gonna resign yourself to having your characters constantly fail the Bechdel test, then here's what should have happened. What should have happened she had this obsession with Shuji. But what could have been this great plot line was cooking for someone. And I know it's going to sound sexist at the moment. But hear me out. Hear me out.
The whole plot line. She only cooks.
I'm not telling Nyan to get in the kitchen.
No, no. I'm referencing a specific. You're leading up to this too, but that line that she has where she's like, I only cook for people that I like. I only cook for people that I care about. Correct. Yeah.
And Xavier has this whole thing.
Xavier?
You know, I didn't remember, to be honest.
That's the thing. The English dub pronounces it Xavier, and every time I'm like, stop it. What are you doing? Stop it.
Xavier. I actually didn't remember that. I'll be honest. I never remembered hearing his name.
Yeah.
I just kind of knew him as that guy.
He is largely he is that guy. He is that guy who just kind of hangs out. Yeah. He shows up every once in a while to remind you that he exists. But kind of similar to Nyan, honestly. I feel like Nyan and Xavier both.
Which is why
they get kind of shunted to the side.
Which is why what should have happened was her beginning to have this struggle between having those feelings that she had for Shuji and begin to really develop those for Xavier Xavier. Let's call him Olivet. Fuck his first name.
So you're saying that Nyan should have been her focus should have been on Xavier as a romantic interest instead,
or at least the friend one. Like even if everything in the show
even
is going to obviously remain
some
platonic
form of relationship. Yeah.
That she should have started to develop some form of emotional connection to him. Because he was the character, right? Because then you have these two Zeon characters. Shalia, fully dedicated to Char and Char's mission.
Mm-hmm.
Xavier,
Char is my bro.
I'm going to stick with him. Olivet, fully dedicated to Cassilia.
Right, he's a mole.
And the original ideals of Zeon. Because granted, I don't think he fully understood Cassilia's goals.
Oh yeah, nobody did, including the viewer.
Yeah. So I was gonna say, did not expect her to become the new carbon copy of her brother.
Yeah.
Bold move.
Yeah.
But regardless,
also extremely bold move to have her go out the exact same way she did in the original series.
Oh, loved that.
Ruled.
I loved that.
That was great.
That was sick. I was in love with that. But yeah, so it was a great parallel. Because obviously, I'm gonna footnote this. This is my side footnote.
Mm-hmm.
That obviously should not have happened between Shalia and Machu, and I'm glad it didn't. Thought it might have for a moment when he had his hand on the wall in that scene, in that pose.
I did not read it.
I was so worried.
I did not read it
like
like
that.
I was so
worried.
I did not read
for
it like
a
that
second.
At all. Nope.
No. It didn't. I was worried it was gonna.
Nah.
I saw it for the second, and I was like, please don't. I was like, don't. We're through this. We've been through this. We were getting better. And then it didn't happen, and I was like, okay, we're good. No, we're chill. It was cool. No, it became cool. I was worried for that second,
mm-hmm.
all right? I'm an anime old head. I'm an anime unk.
You've been through the trenches, is what you're trying to say.
So I got the PTSD for a second, all right? It was fine. We're over it. It was okay. And that's why I'm making this a footnote only. I'm glad it didn't happen.
No, Shalia, I hesitate to call him a good dude, but he's a good dude.
Yeah. I get what you. Yeah, we know what we know what we mean by that.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing. Then it's there was the slight parallel between the ideologies, but I feel like what they should have done is really harped on that connection, right? Between, if there was a deeper connection between even just the ideologies. So that's why I meant not even maybe romantic, right? But just even an ideological, platonic, kind of connection. Because Machu had that with Shalia, right? Shalia got to Machu got to really know and understand more about Shalia's motivation. right? They kind of essentially engage in a bit of that like kind of new type connection between like really starting to gauge that, like, why, am I doing this? Why am I wanting you to do this? And they got to at least understand each other's motivation.
Mm-hmm.
Where we didn't get that with Nyan and Olivet, and I get it. Like some of the other members of the Sodan were just kind of there.
I feel like Xavier got a whole lot more meat in the back 4 episodes, like 8 through 12, and had way too little meat in the first 7.
Which is partly why
It's
I wanted,
very off
I
balance.
think to me, I think that's why to me I really would have liked this switch to happen sooner.
Sure.
Like at maybe almost that halfway mark, because that's where I think then we could have had more of like this connection between Nyan and Olivet, because then they can get that meat, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think it's then maybe it makes it maybe more okay to like be like, all right, well, the first half you don't get as much meat on him because there's we're just kind of the Xeon people are meant to be more of a mystery. This is about Machu, Nyan, and Shuji and them going through clan battle.
And we're just kind of
Machu
following him, like
them making a relationship. So that wouldn't have been fine.
He's just kind of getting beat up and like running around trying to like find whoever piloted the Gquuuuux and stole it, and that's really all you've got to work with is just like him being like a pseudo Team Rocket of like trying to catch the protagonist and failing, and it's too much time spent on that and not enough time on like the actual conflict that there could be between him, this like devout Xeon follower, and Nyan, who is a refugee of war. Like you could have had a lot more really interesting dynamics there.
Yeah, I mean, now granted, like I think him trying to figure out the Gquuuuux pilot, I think again that was like interesting to have for them, so that you kind of knew like maybe why they knew who it was, or that then I think it gives, I think them kind of slowly figuring out Machu's involvement, I think helps the it helps Shalia have reason, or like for him to kind of figure out who had, or like why, or how he's going to go about essentially recruiting Machu to his ideology. But what I do love and like though is at least like, I was trying to look for something and then my brain went to a different direction. I do agree that there was, though, too much time spent on that concept. I think it should have just been like a thing we knew was happening.
Yeah. What do you think Shuji Ito is? Because this really, I've been really like fighting with myself about this.
I think he's some form of manifestation. Because like clearly the Kita is kind of meant to be this like very nebulous
Kita.
Yeah. And it's like this it's almost like this kind of extra dimensional kind of force almost, right?
Or
like it's
light
almost like
refracting off of the Minovsky particles, if Shalia is to be believed.
But I mean, like, but that's the thing, right? Like, the fact that there is almost this multiverse, right? Because there are these, distinct, all these versions of Char that Lala has dreamt into existence.
The other side.
Right? There is a very clear, aspect that the Kita and the powers that new types have and develop has a true, like, psychomatic and, like, almost like omnipotent force capable and behind it, right? Because you don't just like accidentally make a universe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly.
Or like you don't do it with a low amount of power.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's got to be a real force, right? And so from that, then I kind of look at it as this realm of like, you know, I think Shuji really is kind of this manifestation of its will.
Okay.
Because it feels like he's kind of meant to balance it. But like Lala has always clearly had this like very distinct and strong connection to it. That's why she is such a powerful being in the original series.
Yeah.
And so I think it's kind of this mix of being maybe her will or the connection that she has to the Kira Kira, and it's almost like its willful manifestation to protect her. This maybe almost kind of omnipotent force or being that creates this or is controlling it or whatever has some connection to it. He's clearly meant to be some like really esoteric shit, right? Like,
yeah, they don't
very clearly
for as much explaining in like quotation marks
Eva
as they do, especially
out.
in like episode 11 and 12. Like there were it feels like every 5 minutes they will stop the action, go back into the Kira Kira, and be like, all right, let's talk again for another few minutes about what's going on. Like they do that several times. And even then you still come away from it like, I still don't fully understand who this guy is and where he came from. I get his motivation now, you know, what his goal is.
Yeah.
But I don't really understand. Like this could have really benefited from like an OVA that like lets you see where he originates from. My crack theory.
Yeah.
I have obviously no way for me to say if this is true. It could be insane, but whatever. My crack theory is that Shuji is the child of Lala and Char from the timeline that she is essentially trying to avoid. The one where
Char died,
where Char dies,
she lived.
but she lives. Yeah.
See, because that's really important, because the reason this exists is not because she died and suddenly got stuck in some form of loop. She's from a version of 0079 that somehow Char died.
Exactly.
Which is
it's an offset already of the original.
Yeah, which is like, that was my thing, was I was caught super off guard where I was like, wait a minute. So you're telling me now this is not just an alternate universe 007. This is an alternate of an alternate universe 0079.
Yes.
What?
Yeah.
Like,
I kind of mentioned this a bit earlier, where it's like we're getting the offshoot of that original 79 timeline that we're familiar with. How wild was it, by the way? There's obviously a lot to be said about all of the references and callbacks to 0079. How wild was it when they were in the Kira Kira? Machu is actually finding out fully like what happened to Char and like what the reasoning is behind his disappearance and everything, and they're just straight up showing you original footage from the 0079 anime of the fight between him and Emerald. How I popped off so hard when that happened.
Right, and then when he dies, that's the only part that they had to make new, right? They had to suddenly make new. But yeah, I loved that. It was so funny to me. I'm just like, suddenly
that
it's
was
just like
fantastic.
Why does this like blurry?
why are your memories, why are your dreams in like 480p? What's going on? What is that?
Like really boxy.
Yeah, really boxy. It's like animated on like 4s. What the hell is
The
happening
white Gundam, here? The white Gundam suddenly looks really boxy for some reason.
So interesting.
The red Gundam doesn't look at all like that. That was so funny to me. And I mean, like, I lost it when I saw that. I was like, wait a minute.
But yeah, Shuji as a character, I think personally, I feel like he has a lot to be desired. It is the kind of character that is really interesting as a concept, But I feel like, again, it's another victim of this like runtime that they've committed to, where he doesn't get fleshed out to the degree that I would have liked him to. And like his quote unquote like heel turn and being like, this was my plan all along to destroy this universe. And, you know, I will destroy every universe I need to in order to make sure that Lala is happy. I just feel like it's the kind of thing that just shows up and you're just kind of like, yeah, I guess. Okay, fine. It really left me personally kind of like meh on the whole thing.
And that is because everything around the Lala, Char, Shuji combination is made utterly too vague.
Yeah, super.
The reality
super
should have been, that she like, because there is this point where it is essentially shown that Char knows Shuji and worked with Shuji. You know, almost essentially.
Well, he lets him have
giving
the red
him
Gundam.
the red Gundam. Yeah. And that is like just this side conversation note, and it's just like, anyway, we need to deal with now.
It's such a footnote when it should have been much more than that.
Yeah, it should be the biggest thing. It should be everything that is said about this. But instead, we got to spend way too much time learning about the current Lala that is going to stay on Earth.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess it was relevant for the end. But
it was. The ending of this series is notable because it is one of the few times where it seems like Char and Lala are genuinely going to get a happy ending of some sort.
Yes.
Yeah.
And deserved.
But boy, a whole lot had to happen to get there, right?
Yeah. Well, but what confuses me then is the Lala that was from the other alternate universe awakens.
Yes.
So where did she go?
Where'd she go? She went back to her home planet. No, that is generally.
But which is where?
That's genuinely what I.
Where there's a Lala.
No.
Where there's already.
I'm making a Simpsons joke, but like the
I know, but I'm just like.
But
like, where did she go?
No, my genuine understanding of that is that she triggered a void and returned back to her timeline effectively of where she was supposed to be. So then at the end of this series, the only Lala in this universe is the one that this universe's Char finds and reconnects with.
Which I think that's fine. And that's the reality is I do think that is, I think it's maybe twofold, because I think maybe then your concept of Shuji being the child of a Lala and Char, I think would work. But I honestly maybe would end up thinking, because clearly like time is a nebulous unreality and Shuji disappears. So that's where I was going to say maybe, or I don't know, maybe were you saying like this timeline as in like the one where they get together in the end and their child is Shuji?
No. I'm thinking more so the Lala that we were just talking about, the one that is with
the one that died,
that's trapped in the Rose of Sharon.
Yeah.
That like her child is Shuji.
I think I could see that, but obviously the issue with that theory is that she's stuck in this stasis, right?
Yeah.
So at some point, essentially, she disappears from the timeline. So unless she had the child prior to
like they would have for my crack theory to work, they would have already have had the child before any of this goes down.
Which I feel like wouldn't be less likely the case. And what kind of would make me end up thinking that is that maybe Shuji could be the child of the two. But like, what I think maybe why I think my theory is partly just because of the very ending where Machu has the Gundam tell her that Shuji is out there somewhere.
Okay. So you were talking earlier about the Bechdel test and about like whether there are any scenes. This immediately struck out to me. I was like, can we not? You get to the very end, right?
I was mad. I
Machu
was actually
mad. Because the other thing that you're supposed to like believe throughout this series is that like Nyan and Machu are developing a closeness and a friendship with each other. And you get to this point at the very end where it's like they have left and they have made their way to the beach on Earth. They have seen the ocean. It's the thing that Machu was like striving for this whole time, is this sense of personal freedom and achievement. And I'm really living, I'm really doing something. And she's there with Nyan and they are together. And then the very, very end, it's like, yeah, but also Shuji's out there somewhere. And we gotta, we can't just have like our friendship that we have. We also gotta...
Yeah, God forbid we have character development that doesn't involve a fucking dude.
We can't let go of Shuji. And that very last line where she's like, the Gundam told me that he's out there. In the moment, I was like, that's a cute reference to the way that he would constantly communicate and be like, the Gundam, so says the Gundam told me. Like, I was like, that's a cute reference to how he spoke.
So says the Gundam.
But yeah, the more I think about it, the more I'm like, I could have done without that at all.
Yes.
Like, we really didn't need that.
I think if what they should have done was, it should have been maybe a conversation about helping Zeon or whatever, like being a part of the Reformation or blah, 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 like their conversation could have been about like maybe they're going to join, or maybe they're just going to like, they're going to continue being kind of just like wild, fugitives.
Mm-hmm.
Something
Which
like
seems
that.
to be the
like
plan, is that
like
they're,
that could have, I think one of those, like that could have been the discussion, and and then like at most the reference to Shuji being like damn, if only they could have been here at the beach with us. And if anything, then the line where she says the Gundam tells me to should have been either from like, if the like Nyan asking the question, or do you think we're doing the right thing, or like maybe them being like I think if Machu said like we're gonna be okay or whatever, or like we have a bright future ahead of us, and then Nyan asking like, why do you think that? And then her answer was, the Gundam told me. Mm-hmm. That would have been good. Yeah. That would have been a good way to do that.
I agree.
Like not making it explicitly just to say Shuji's out there, the Gundam told me.
We got to go find Shuji.
Because it just wraps her then into becoming the same character that Shuji was, where all he cared about was finding the Rose of Shra, right? That's all he cared about at that point. And it makes Machu then kind of that same thing, which you could say is like a parallel and maybe some like whatever writing, but like to me it just, again, it makes her fail the Bechdel test again.
It's, for me, it's like,
and it's just like,
I don't, well, I mean, it would be understandable given the circumstances. I mean, he tried to kill them, but I don't expect them to be like, we hate Shuji, we're never going to talk about Shuji again.
Yeah.
It's just that in this specific moment, with this being the very end of the series, the bow I'm looking for, on like the bow on top, I'm looking for is for them to have been able to develop a genuine friendship with each other separate from Shuji.
Correct.
As opposed to the thing that unites them, or the thing that connects them, brings them together, is their caring for Shuji and, wanting to find him.
Yes.
Should we talk about...
I think... Yes.
What we like about this series?
I actually want to get to that last, because I like to end on that.
Sure.
Although, granted, what I want to talk about next is kind of that.
Okay.
So... maybe. But I wanted to talk about the mechs.
Yes.
Despite the original creator's concept that the series maybe devolves too much on not lack of war is bad and cool mech fight, let's take a moment to talk about cool mech. Let's completely go against his wishes and talk about cool mech.
I do feel that this series steps away from, like, there is a sense of like the original series.
I mean, his opinion
covered,
was also about a Mercury.
Yeah, the original series obviously very heavily influenced by like post World War II. There's a lot of heavy themes about like self-preservation and like finding your own sense of personal freedom, whether or not it's necessary to kill or not. It should be noted, Machu, I believe, is the first main character in a Gundam series to not have a body count, if I remember that right. She never actually kills anyone.
Do the MPs live?
I think
because she says like it's either kill or be killed.
I think they still live. I don't think she actually ends up killing anyone. And the Tri-Stars are, of course, killed by Neon, who has a major body count.
A major body count. She might have the biggest body count.
But that's an interesting thing that this series is doing, where it's establishing that like to be a new type does not necessarily mean that you also have to be a killer. But yes,
sure.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of point that out because that was a really interesting thing about Machu, that she does not succumb to the bloodlust really at any point in this series.
Yeah, she's not really put in the position though either. You know, a lot of the mechs in the clan battles kind of all have had their, you know, they've all kind of for most of them, they're really only operating in this realm of, you know, they're all kind of only operating in this realm of like, hey, you don't really go for the kill shot. You know, you go to disable, you know, so you destroy a head. The Gundam will blow up, but we've got, you know, ejection seats.
Yeah, you can evacuate. Yep.
But that's where the question, I think, of double checking on the first guy.
Yeah.
Because I think she kind of stabs near that spot.
Yeah, I get you.
The cockpit spot. So like maybe she might have killed that guy, but I don't fully remember. But other than that, yeah, she doesn't really have a body count, you know, because she doesn't really fight the Zeon forces in the final fight, you know. So it's kind of, I think, if she has one, it's very small, and I think that's still a step up. Like he doesn't squish a guy in the like first episode.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, blood on her hands. I'm here to save you. But yeah, because like that is the thing though, right? So like Gquuuuux, super polarizing design. A lot of people were really not into it.
Yes.
At first, I feel like a lot of people were. I was in the camp. I was really into it.
I am too. It feels like it's taking the same evolution path that Ariel was taking in Witch from Mercury, where it's like we're just going rounder and more modern and more of an organic look to it as it goes.
Yeah, I suppose I need to remind myself that Gundam's design. Yeah, that one. Yes, I really, because I do really like that design. Because I really like that it does, you know, it's still unequivocally Gundam, right? Which I think any Gundam, like, you know, name Gundam, like should be, I feel like, you know. But like, yeah, I like that, but obviously it's unique and different, but it's still just like very clearly Gundam, where Gquuuuux was a little bit off the like kind of classic design.
Yeah.
But in this way that it still really felt, and that's the thing, is I think it had to be, because this is a universe where the White Gundam does exist. It became the Red Gundam, but it did exist still. So it can't, to me, look too much like the White Gundam, because it and the Red Gundam are just the same but different colors. So the Gquuuuux to me had to look different.
Yeah.
And then what I really do like about it then is that everything about it is unique, but still feeling Gundam.
It's like you're looking at a Gundam through a like fogged up window. And you're like,
which
the
again
general
is
shape is like, the general shape and the colors is like, that's Gundam. But then all the details about it, when you actually like wipe the fog away, is like, oh, this is really different.
Yeah, and I love that it has this pre-Psychomu versus Psychomu mode.
Opens the mouth.
This kind of dormant, and eyes.
There's your Ava, you know, the weird like techno-organic mouth that opens up. And then you have everything to do with G-Fred.
Yes. Which is similarly a great design.
A great design. And look, maybe I'm not saying Hideaki Anno has a type, but maybe what I'm saying is that Hideaki Anno has a goddamn type. Okay.
yeah. I mean, look, everybody saw it, and immediately was just like, here's your Ava and your Gundam. Yep. You know, like, look, we all saw it. We all said it. It was there.
Yep.
But I mean, that's the thing, right? The head shape is so Ava.
I mean, just the color palette is like.
I mean, yeah,
it is a flagrant thing.
But even then, it's just like the head is like the same.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like you just remove the chin and mouth, and it's there. Mm-hmm. You know, like, it's just like, instead of making it a face, they gave it this like psycho digital face. You know, but it's there. It's still entirely there.
Mm-hmm. Also, shout out to the Zaku units in this series that just have ridiculously thick thighs, and like that's like the major design change for them. Is like they're mostly the same, got a little more detail going on in the paneling, but also just the meatiest thighs. Like that is, and I'm just like, yes, correct.
You're right, because I would say you look at like the Rick Doms, and they have the big feet, mm-hmm. and that's kind of where Zaku was. It was like everything, it like came out in the triangle, right? The feet were big, mm-hmm. but then they conjoined to the hips. The Zaku just ate too many Krabby Patties, and here they are.
Yep.
Also, I just noticed this. I'm looking at the fucking picture. Why the Zaku got a fucking dick thruster?
Hey, man.
Wait a minute.
I did not
notice this.
That has a long history.
Wait a minute.
Across like a host of anime. There are
I've never noticed. Yeah,
there's a lot of mecha anime that are like, let's play around with that groin area. Let's.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant like the previous Zaku had a dick thruster. I'm like, I don't remember this.
Let's make the cod piece into a cod piece of conversation. You know, let's really get something going.
They don't. I was gonna say they don't. Okay, the previous ones definitely don't. Because I'm like, wait a minute. What do you mean? Oh, never mind. Okay.
Everything do.
Yes, you're correct. Various of them have been played with, but at least I was gonna say it's not part of the original. That is a new design. Somebody in that room was like, guys, dick thruster.
Guys, just wrote it on the whiteboard, underlined it.
It's the same intern who made the logo, mm-hmm. the changes to the logo at the last minute.
They just took
I'm telling you.
Took a copy of Zone of the Enders 2 for the Xbox 360 and just like slammed it on the table. They were just like,
dick thruster.
Look at the cod pieces. Just look at them. You get to work.
You know what I really... Okay, here's the thing. Hold on. I need to, like... I was... Oh, you know what? I'll bring it up later. Here's what I need. All right. So we're already establishing the infinite treasure trove now for all you 007 haters and lovers, right? 007, I mean. Not 007, not James Bond. Here's what we need.
They did give...
We need the
there
anime.
There were two different moments in this series where a character talks to one of the main female leads, whether it's Machu or Nyan, and goes, listen, you need to decide for yourself what you want to do. Here's a gun.
No. I want to get to that later.
Okay. Yeah.
Here's what we've learned. We have learned there is a universe and a story to be told about Char Big Zam.
Okay, so we're on this.
The real red
we're getting
comet.
to this. So this series, as it is truly, like, there are so many instances of fan service. This entire show feels like crack fan fiction. That the other, like, notable people in the anime industry got to make, instead of it just living on, like, AO3 or something. Like, it's like, let's take just pure Gundam fan fiction and we're gonna throw a huge budget behind it. And this is such a big thing of that, of like, if we're gonna do this, we gotta put a bunch of Big Zam in there. Have multiple Big Zams. Have Char pilot. What if Char, like, they're on, like, their 4th cup of coffee. What if Char piloted the Big Zam? Wouldn't that be the coolest thing ever? And they're just, like, frantically writing this down. Like,
I'm sorry, because to reference and get a visual reference to remind myself what a lot of these mech look like and characters and stuff. I'm on the Gundam info site, and when I pulled up the Big Zam, the Gquuuuux version of Big Zam, I love that the front is generally the front. When you hit back on the image, it's not even the full back.
Yeah,
it's the side.
Yeah,
with part of the back. Fucking Big Zam is too much. They needed a front, back, and side image for Big Zam.
Yeah.
Because it's all about Big Zam.
It's all about it.
Yeah, I mean, regardless, though, going back to at least the mech part, I do really love the mechs. And similarly, I love both Haru and Conch. They're great characters. I love this aspect that Conch and Haru... I mean, Haru does just straight up speak. Conch is able to almost kind of make their will known to both, I guess, Shuji and...
It was really funny to
Neon.
me, one of the first introductions we have to Conch, where Conch, like, prints out the, like, Amazon wish list for the other characters, and they're like, oh, he wants to buy these planes so that he can get to Earth. And I'm like, how often does Conch have to, like, print out Amazon wish lists for people to be like, this is my character's motivation? Like, that's an interesting feature for this spider robot to have.
Yes. Both of them, I think, because they really worked to end up being, when that split happened, really being the, like, just that, like, little bit, like, voice of, not reason or wisdom, but, like, just that, like, little extra voice to maybe give them that little bit more of something, you know?
I think
and they're just cute.
I think the best thing about Haru in this series is not Haru. The best thing about Haru is the black knitted palm hat that they wear. because then first of all, it looks super cute on them, but then also Machu wears it at times and it's super cute on her. But then also when Neon pilots the Gquuuuux, she also wears it, because and they treat it, there's this sort of, like, half joke of, like, to be able to pilot the Gquuuuux, an important part of that is that you gotta put the hat on, and I think that's a really funny bit that they do.
Yes, I do wish we got some explanation to what their connections were to said characters or robot. So, like, Haru clearly, like, has function to the Gquuuuux. So, like, how did, like, what happened?
Okay,
There's a story
we're getting back into my crack theories. So
Yep,
in the
back
in
in the
the
crack.
very last episode, there is the part where,
Back at the crack.
was it the last episode? Might be one of the last few, but there's the part where Machu, I'm gonna forget the name of the specific thing, but she like destroys a part inside of the Gquuuuux cockpit and takes over like full control. And her, you have like the mechanical arms that come down and they like the hands and fingers interlock with each other.
Yeah.
There's a very brief moment where you see the like flash or like the illusion of these like sleeved arms, like male arms resting over top of her arms. My crack theory, and I'm pretty sure other people are theorizing this as well, if not outright like being like this is what it is that Gquuuuux somehow has the soul of Amuro inside of it. And the reason that Haro is able to like connects with Gquuuuux or understands it so well is because it's Amuro's soul inside of the Gquuuuux.
Yeah, I remember early some of the thought in that was Char. That is Char's.
Yeah.
Is in either Haro or whatever. But I could definitely see maybe it's somehow being tied. It's just tough because it would all then shift and depend on whatever happened to Amuro after side 7.
Yeah, it's another like really vague thing where I think you're just kind of meant to speculate on it, and because God forbid
Which
they're
is
going to give you a
fine.
concrete answer on something like that.
I know. Which, I mean, even then, like, that type of stuff is fine. I don't have a problem with not getting every answer, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I did, I wouldn't like Warhammer.
Oh no, certainly.
But
But the level of
all
the
of
type of
Warhammer is
vagueness,
speculative crap.
the type of vagueness that this series has, though, we can agree is like detrimental to to enjoying it.
And like, because there needs to be something,
Yeah.
right? And because the vagueness ends up being in the characters, which is not what you wanted.
Right.
Warhammer's
Correct.
vague when it comes to the rules and the whys, right? Why is something this way? Why does something become this way? That's where a lot of vagueness comes in. You don't know why the Imperium has specifically decided that they can only tithe this, or that they've only decided that the lasgun is the only thing that the guardsmen are going to own. You don't know. I mean, there are answers in some regards to these things, but like there is often not concrete answers to those things. But when you are faced with a character, like if you're reading a story about a character in a 40K book, generally you are getting the, you learn who you have, maybe what is motivating them, and then what their mission is. They do the thing, and then it ends. It's not a question of like, but who are you, and who is this, and who is that, and who is this, or who is that?
Mm-hmm.
Like not everybody's a mystery. In this show, everybody's a mystery. Yeah. And even the robots are a mystery. But I definitely, like I said, like I do though I do like the mechs and the designs that were in here. I also liked the way that they did do this mix of the 3D and the 2D. I know it's a thing that a lot of people have continued to come in and around and whatever on. And I'm kind of glad that at least we're finally like, especially versus like 10 years ago,
It is
like way less in this conversation.
Listen, 3D animation continues to improve over time. I think this series is a great example of 3D animation done right. I like so much of like the actual mech combat and the action set pieces in this series are just the highlights of the entire series. It is like if the story like crashes out for you, at least stay for the action, because the action, especially in the last couple episodes, is incredible. It is genuinely fantastic what they put together for these fight scenes. It's really cool.
Yeah, and I mean, and here's the thing, and I think what really helped it was that, these mechs and models were 3D, but they're all generally sitting in this 2D planescape, right? Like the world around them wasn't suddenly only 3D.
Mm-hmm.
The weapons and the not the weapons, but the gun, like the actual firing and whatnot of the weapons was 2D, right? Like when you'd see the beam go across the screen, that was still 2D. And that is a thing, right? What would happen was that, like, when they were deciding that these things are going to become all 3D, they would even make that stuff like kind of 3-dimensional, right? And that's where you lose a lot of times. That's where you lose that stuff. But like close-ups of the mechs, important impact moments, they would still get into points where these mechs would become 2D. It wasn't ever this realm where it was always a 3D model living in a 2D world kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And that is really what helps, I think. Like, just really sell how well they work out, and they work in this show. Now let's talk about what we like in general.
Yeah, so that is, like I say, that is, for me personally, the actual mecha combat was a highlight. I think it's one of the best things about this series. I think the series is, its art design, its audio-visual design, is genuinely the thing to watch it for. In terms of, like, recommending this to people, like, the best things about it, I think, are... it's the callbacks to 0079. If you're somebody who has seen 0079 previously, there's a lot of great callbacks and references to that. And then it's really compelling just from a visual. It's a feast for the eyes visually. The soundtrack is fantastic. I love the way that they sort of...
let's all run in place to the beat. Let's go.
A lot of the early half of the series has a lot of this like newer, music. And then as you get into the back half and more of the connections for 0079 start appearing, you also hear a lot more tracks from like the original Gundam series. And the music like shifts to reflect that. And that was a really cool thing to experience. The sound effects are on point, new and old. I mean, they perfectly nail all of the sound effects from the original series. And it just proves how like timeless they are. Like they're always going to sound incredible. I adore how much attention is given to Minovsky particles. Like they are just frequently, constantly being brought up and their importance. There is a specific scene during one of the clan battles. I think it might be the first one actually that Machi participates in, where they show you the enemy mech just sort of like phasing in and out of view and like physical existence, like constantly becoming visible, then invisible, then visible again. And it is such a really neat effect, and like one of the best ways I've seen Minovsky particles be represented, as far as like you can see this thing and then now you can't because of the particles interfering. Just really sells it. It is an anime that visually I feel like knocks it out of the park in every way. The music is so great. It's just a lot of the actual main story where you'll find a lot of my gripes that I have.
And that's where I want to continue, because like I know we kind of talked a lot about like we really would have wanted more and more and more about this character, that character. I'm going to talk about why that's a good thing.
Okay.
And it's the aspect that you want to know more. There are so many characters in media, movies, shows, whatever. You're just like, I don't care, dude. It's just a great example of this is Dex and Gates. I see their characters. They're an interesting, callback for especially Gates and Bask, right? I did not want to see them any more than I saw them.
I agree.
I I didn't want to. I didn't care about them, and that's fine. They were short-term enemies. But the fact that I care so much about wanting to have Machu, Nyan, and Shuji, and even Shalia and Xavier be fleshed out 100%. More, to know more about him, right? The fact that I want it show that there was so much of like there was such like an attractive aspect to seeing them as characters and wanting them to grow. The thing was, I came back every week knowing and wanting to see just more about Machu and Nyan and like Shuji, obviously at the various points. I really wanted to know more, and I wanted to see them grow. Because here's the thing. Here's the thing that has begun happening for me as an adult man watching anime. When I do, because it's not often anymore. I've really shifted because we're getting older. When me and you were at Anime Club. Over a decade ago.
We could say over a decade ago.
Over a decade ago.
Yeah.
Over a decade ago.
Correct.
Starting at 12 years ago. We joked and we played into, right, a lot of the like, I don't want to necessarily, I'm trying to find the best way to word it, but like we really played into the waifu mentality, the whole like, the kind of classic, right? We celebrated beach episodes jokingly in some extent, right? But like,
we were bought in on a lot of the tropes that were still existing and occurring within a lot of major anime. Absolutely.
And still do. But as we've grown up, we've learned and kind of come into this realm of like that we don't really hold as much value into that. And suddenly when you're watching anime, when I'm watching anime, and especially I'm watching anime where the main characters are high schoolers, they're children, I'm not watching them, for like I got really upset when we got into the unnecessary body shots of Machu when she was suntanning on the roof. Right?
That was pretty blatant.
I was annoyed.
I thought
I was annoyed and I was upset.
The handstand stuff that she was doing was interesting, as it ties into this idea of gravity being sort of like carrying throughout. I was like, that's interesting. That's a fun dynamic thing. But I was like, we're towing a line.
Her on the rooftop. I feel like I can see a purpose.
Her on the rooftop.
I can see a purpose.
Was straight up like, all right, here is a prolonged shot of her chest in a bikini, and I'm like, all right, guys, come on, stop.
Yeah, and exactly, and that upset me, and because what I really love about watching those characters is I love watching them grow. I love seeing characters in shows like this, or characters like. It's why I love Bocchi the Rock. I don't just love Bocchi the Rock because, it's a rock show. It's a show about music. Especially, honestly, it's a show about the type of music that I grew up loving. Like that got me. That like when I was getting into anime, right? Like Asian Kung Fu Generation is like a pivotal band in my existence of a person. Like they formed an entire genre of music that has never truly been matched again, right? And so to some extent, and so and that's not just why I love Bocchi. I love Bocchi because I loved watching her grow. I loved her development. She was just this amazing character that you watch and grow. And you see her become something special, and I was hooked in wanting to see that from any of the characters, but like especially Machu, like especially Machu, right? Because she's the main character, right? And I would always understood that while I maybe wanted that for Nyan, I could surmise to get into the realm where like I'm not gonna get it, right? Especially in a short series, maybe I'm not gonna get it for Nyan, but I wanted it for Machu because I cared so much about Machu's character. And like I wanted to see her grow, and that's where that's where that disappointment in that last scene it hits so hard, and like I want to see her, defeat the Bechdel test, because at least if there is one character that at least got growth, not the amount maybe I wanted, but got it was Machu. I wanted it to be there. We got to see her being this forlorn, just disenfranchised kid who, knows that she's kind of just in this space, that everything about her life is kind of artificial.
She's in cram school. She wants to be a jellyfish. She knows that there's more that she could be doing, but she's just kind of in a stagnant state.
Oh, and I love that answer. I love that she's like, I want to be a jellyfish.
Yeah, that was so fun.
It's so indicative of her character and her being. Of course, she doesn't want to be a literal jellyfish mom. Like that's not the point. What you're missing is her, like, essentially what could just be her amazing artistic thinking. She's an outside thinker, and that's a great mind potentially. It's in there. And I mean, she's a new type, so like there's obviously the other aspect of where her mind could go, but like it's just there was all this showing of this growth and where she is, and I think I feel like I felt that started to feel that in the end, right? Because like Nyan asked about seeing her parents, or that she's leaving them, or that like whatever, and she's kind of like, they'll get over it.
But then she does leave a message for them, and
but she's still like, she acknowledges that they do care, and that definitely. She does want to check in, because that is important, and that's a very mature way to think about that, right? Like, it's knowing that like, your parents aren't always maybe on your side, and they can feel like they're nagging at you, but they do love you. And and by being forcibly separated and being in that scenario, I think it at least does show that like she does realize that, but she also now kind of knows like, well, I can kind of do my own thing, and then becomes Miles Morales and jumps off a building. I'm gonna do my own thing. But no, I mean, like, Machu was the thing that really kept me going on the whole thing.
I really liked her.
Right. Yeah. I really cared about her, and that's why I wanted so much for her, because there was just so much to have in it. And that's where like, I really want to emphasize what that, like, all these criticism we front loaded. Right. And that's because honestly, like, when we get into I like reviews that end in like this part, and I think it's gonna be a little tough because we start off pretty hot, on the criticism train, right? But I want to make it very clear that like there is so much to like about the show, and you were right. The action is wonderful, to the chagrin of the original creator. I really cared about Machu, and I love that she had, as we kind of talked about, she had this somewhat parallel to being like an Amuro, but what I liked about her was her pits and her like second guesses were not just from, someone said one thing about me and now I question everything. She was given really big questions to answer.
Yeah.
like she was suddenly given this question of like, you're one of the people you finally made really close friends with, and the guy that you started to fall in love with, right, is gone. And now you've got this big military staring at you being like, hey, tell us everything you know, and then also get in the mech. And, you know, but that's what I like, is that she doesn't sit there and suddenly start cracking under the pressure.
Yeah.
She realizes, I want to find these answers, and I'll get to them. But for now, what I will do, I will play my role and do what I need to do when I'm told, and I'll find my way to get to something.
Yeah.
Right? And she does that. She escapes. Granted, she's allowed to escape, but she escapes. She finds her opening. She escapes in the Gquuuuux, goes to Earth, and begins to kind of uncover this secret. And then, you know, she gets captured again. She learns more. She and Shalia have this discussion. She learns more about the Rose of Sharon, but she learns to stand up. Like she begins to discover what she needs to stand up for. And I love that. And there just should have been so much more. But I'm glad that I want more.
Yes,
because there's so many times there are characters there is
a world of difference between feeling unfulfilled by a series and the result being that you don't want to see any more of it, and being unfulfilled but still wanting to see more. Like, there is a huge difference. And
I think as we can maybe talk about our overall kind of opinion, rating, whatever you want to call it, it's why I really fear this show being called mid at the end. I fear that because mid has developed a connotation almost of bad.
Yes.
You know? Because if it's not peak, then it's mid, and the mid equals
mid is bad, a 3 instead of being like a 5 or a 6 like it should be.
And because we look at a 5 or 6 as not being good enough,
which is getting into the whole thing of like the American educational system and how much that grading has affected us. Yeah. We don't need to get into that, I feel like, but we can agree that like I personally would consider this to be kind of a middle of the road series in relation to Gundam. But that does not mean that it's middle of the road what series. It should be.
Exactly. It's what middle of the road should mean. In that it's mid in a good way.
Yes, where it's excelling in some elements and failing in others, and then the results are
it's just it's not perfect. Yes. It's just not. It's not peak. It's not amazing. It's good.
Yes, I would agree with that.
But in a middle way. It's good in a midway. You know, it's good. It's parentheses good, and that's what I mean. That's why it's like I fear calling it mid, because obviously I don't want people. I wouldn't want like people who listen to opinions and say like, oh, it's mid, so that means it shouldn't get that maybe unplanned second season, you know, or 24 episodes. You know, because as far as it stands, right, it's not getting anything.
And to be clear, like
if it got more, it could.
When I say that I want
money,
when I'm saying at multiple points throughout this review that I want, because we had our different approaches where, like you were saying, you know, let's introduce these 79 elements earlier. I was saying let's extend this out to 24 episodes. When I say extend this out to 24 episodes, I don't mean now. I'm talking about when the series was first being developed. It should have been 24 episodes from the start, so that the current story that is told in this series is given that breathing room. I don't think if you now add on a second season, I mean, obviously I could be wrong. You know, I'm not making the thing. But I don't think that making a second season now would alleviate or fix the problems with the pacing of this season.
No, and that's unfortunately due to the fact that it was pegged to be a 12-episode miniseries, right? That's the issue. But like, do I think that they could maybe do something? Maybe, maybe they could do like, but like, do I expect that? No. And so am I going to sit here and be like, this needs a second season? Bandai Namco, we need more Gquuuuux. Maybe not. Maybe not.
But if it happens, I'm there for it.
Yeah, if it happens, am I going to be upset? No.
I'll be like, all right, cool. I'll watch that.
Yeah, absolutely. But like, do I think that it will solve the whole series? Probably not. It'll unfortunately end up being kind of a tale of two series, right? And granted, there's a different show that is a tale of two series that people love. And it also has mechs. And that's Gurren Lagann.
Yes.
It is almost two different shows. Similar message and the characters are the same, right? They're shared. But those two paths are almost completely different shows. And then a third function when you look at it being the director's cut version versus the non-director's version.
Mm-hmm. Can I share...
we as a society were robbed of.
Can I share a couple more things that I caught?
Absolutely.
Particularly in like the last episode that were just like nice little like, oh man, that's great. Because when it comes to all the references and the callbacks to like 0079 and various anime series, I really enjoyed all of them. I was just of the thing of like, if you do give the opportunity to do a second season or to somehow expand out, the current story, I don't need there to be more references to 0079. I appreciated them and I liked all of them that I caught, but that's not the thing that I'm like, I need more of this. Like, you and I both fully established what we want more of is of the main three characters. That having been said, I want to give a shout out to, of course, first of all, if we're talking about like our favorite things about this series, Shalia Bull, everything about Shalia Bull, I adore him.
Yeah, he was awesome.
I think they 100% accomplished what they wanted to achieve as far as like taking this one episode character and being like, we're going to make him a central focus and we're really going to actually dive into his relationship with being a new type and how he feels about it. Real quick, this image here that you're seeing on the screen, I want to give a shout out because obviously we talked about how like these characters, Team Pomeranian didn't connect with us in the way that we would have wanted them to. But I have to give a shout out to this reference to a near identical scene from Nadia, The Secret of Blue Water, which is
holy shit,
fantastic series in its own right. I also want to give a shout out to Shalia Bull in this like 5-second scene where he is a tiny little dot in the background and he is wearing the Char glasses. He's got the Char eyepiece on. And how like giddy this made me.
Oh, I love it.
Because everything about his and Char's relationship is so good. And I adore that he would be that guy who, after everything that happens with them and they part ways, he would totally be that guy to be like, I'll start wearing a cool half mask like Char does, like my senpai wore, Maybe my Oshi will notice me again someday if I dress like him and wear the cool eyepiece. Like it just tickled me. Like I really loved this, and it happens for 5 seconds, and I was just like, that's great.
Yeah, it's there quick because you see essentially the three main of the shut up. I wanted to double check one thing, but like I do love I loved like the fact that you kind of saw them. I did find interesting though was the fact that the essentially like, you know, you've got this the leader that they put in instead of, you know, to replace the zombie family, and it was kind of a little bit like
Artesia, aka Salem.
Yeah, I was kind of like,
and also shout out to our boy Rambaral being alive and well.
Hell yeah,
as you
bro.
see here, boy, did I pop off for that. I was like, oh my god, that's Rambaral.
Yeah.
I know that mustache anywhere.
I did not realize that was Ramba.
That is 100% Rambaral, and that man is alive.
It is. I just didn't clock it. I do like though that we do have. I was kind of like, there wasn't really much reference to her being around.
Oh yeah,
This
was another thing where it was like, man, it would have been nice to have
like,
an episode that like addressed this more, like what was going on with Artesia.
It didn't have to be a whole thing. Yeah, it didn't have to be a whole thing. Honestly, it just would have been good if like in those random plot points where like Cassilia, for example, Cassilia, you know, when she kills, you know, when she creates a different, before she's about to commit a different form of mass murder.
Oh, the poisoning Giran
murder.
Yeah.
You know, if like when that was going on or when it was planned, that there was like this like discussion and thought where she, you know, is kind of just like, yeah, so, you know, if someone's like, well, do you think, you know, she'll get in your way? And she was like, she won't be a problem as long as, you know, or like if they're like, you know, she's getting a lot of favor amongst people, and do you think that she'll also be a problem? And then she at least was like, no, because when we when we do our plan, she'll go along with everyone else, blah blah blah, or something like that, you know. Even that would have at least just done something to just let me be like, oh, okay, she is around. Okay, cool. Yeah. Like I definitely didn't need like a lot. I just need it. Just would have been interesting to have something. Just
give us a little bit more of what's going on.
It just helps give just a little bit of that of just context.
100%
for this ending, because I was kind of like, wait, who is that? Because I know they mentioned it.
Yeah, she gets mentioned by name.
I was just like, yeah, that like, oh yeah, she's gonna be there or whatever. But I was just like, wait a minute. If you want to go back to the referential image though of the three of them in the ship, what I find interesting is that they have a different Haro.
Yeah.
Although I want to note how fucking adorable Haro and Conch are playing on the beach.
Yeah, they're very cute.
It is adorable.
Also,
he's got the big hat. He's got the big sun hat. There's the little hermit crabs.
Shout out to a lot of like almost all of their like their beach wear, and then everything they bring with them to the beach, all the beach supplies, the sun hat, the basket, the umbrella, everything like that is in the room that they're sharing in the end credits animation.
The end credits. Yeah. I do like the little final stinger image though of like the Gquuuuux's hands holding the Haro with the beanie.
Yeah.
That's also pretty cute.
I'm telling you, man, that palm hat makes a difference. It's
but I mean, yeah, like I did appreciate the series. I think it also just gave me a lot. It gave me a lot to enjoy, you know, like having just watched, you know, 0079.
Really good timing on that one.
Like, it was great. Yeah, it was just really good timing, and you know, then because of that, like it I felt more desire to watch it, because like I think the thing that I felt after watching 0079 was I was honestly in that realm though where I was like, well, I want to know more about the Universal Century timeline, because I felt like the plight and the the two sides between Xeon and the Federation, I was like, I would like to see more that expansion more. But unfortunately, watching Zeta hasn't really been an option for me. So my only realm to kind of get a little bit of that expansion was Gquuuuux. So that's where it really helped, because now I feel way more equipped to watch the other series, like the universe's series. You know, like I feel way more like ready, like because it's just like, okay, you know, because in the other series, yeah, like you have this realm where technically, you know, you have a scenario where like a Gundam is fighting a Gundam, and not everything is a Zaku, you know, because I am relatively attached to the design of a Zaku, to be honest. Like, part of my attachment to Gundam as a series actually isn't Gundam, it's the Zaku.
Sure.
That mono eye has just always been an iconic design to me. Which is why I really love the Jagdoga, because it's a Zaku, which I have such a mental. Obviously, I have a great attachment to Gundam as a whole, like any Gundam design, but like the idea of a Zaku that I also hold really attachment to with a bird head. It's, you know, that's just peak in my opinion. But yeah, like, so that's a big thing to me, and that's why. But like, so I like that I've had this experience, but that's why I feel so much more equipped to watch things like Gundam Wing, and then probably watch like Witch of Mercury, and I will watch Gundam Seed, because I had a interest in watching it shortly after I watched Code Geass. I saw it on the Sci-Fi Channel, and I watched a number of episodes until suddenly I stopped watching it for whatever random reason. And because that's how it was back in the day, was like you would either just forget about it for a while, and then it would be stop running on whatever channel anime was playing on. It would be gone forever. You know, so because that's how it was. You're just subject to whatever was running. But yeah, like, so despite its potential controversial opinion realm, I feel like I need to watch it because I had an interest. I was interested, and it's a Gundam series that I've always had an attachment to because of how especially much it looks like Code Geass from a character design standpoint. And I love their character design. That was an era of Sunrise. Because for those who maybe don't remember, Sunrise also made Code Geass. And yeah, so like I feel way more equipped to watch those series, and you know, we'll talk about them as we maybe go through them. I'm gonna just at the moment I'm gonna stick with Gundam Wing because I don't know when that's gonna be taken off YouTube.
Sure.
Problem is Gundam Wing is also very long.
Yeah, Gundam Wing's got a little more heft to it. Yep.
One, the version the version of it that's on YouTube is sub only through Gundam Info. So, which means it's like semi-legitimate as far as I know. So the thing about that ends up being that I can't pull the things that I could pull with some of the other series where, you know, I can watch it, you know, I can watch it while I'm working, or, you know, I can have it on a different monitor or whatever. So we'll try our best because there's a lot of episodes to go through of Gundam Wing. And I have to make time to watch those episodes. But there's more in store for our Gundam tales.
We'll be spending a lot more time in the Kira. This is not our last venture into the pretty lights and colors.
No, in fact, I'm pretty sure our next venture is we're probably going to talk about a counterattack.
Yes.
But not Dylan's counterattack.
It is more prevalent than ever. It is very clear that we need to address a counterattack.
Yeah.
Because
a lot of what we talked about with that test goes a lot into my opinion about Char's counterattack.
Mm-hmm.
So stay tuned.
All right, that's a review overall. Gquuuuux,
Yeah,
liked it. Had its flaws, but interesting concept. Either way,
absolutely. Something can be flawed but still enjoyable.
Yes.
Never forget that. Otherwise, yeah, we will see you next week. Hopefully. Well, I'll have we may have a gap, but whatever next episode.
Until then,
we'll be on Warhammer next time, though.
Probably Warhammer. But until then, haro haro.
We'll see you next time. Hurrah.